Hi, my name's Jessica, and I'm a second-year doctoral student studying nursing practice. And today's video, I want to talk about how to study effectively in nursing school. So I want to preface this video by saying when I was an undergrad, I used to make out the little study sheets, and I used to color code everything, and I used to be like, this is the way you study in nursing school. Like, spend all this time making these study guides and making them all color corrected and staring at each one for hours and hours. And I did fairly well in nursing school, but I applied a lot of time. And as I got into my graduate studies and all the research that is required for graduate school, I started to fall in love with research. So then I was like, well, what does the research show? So then I started studying the research on how to effectively study, and you won't believe what I found. So let's talk about it. So if you want to study effectively in nursing school, you need to be able to remember tons and tons of information and then use that information to answer riddle-like questions, which are nursing questions. The first thing is you need to understand the best study techniques. So for example, according to the research, ineffective studying consists of rereading, highlighting, and summarizing information. Now, what does this sound exactly like? This sounds like how every nursing student studies ever. We read the textbook, we highlight the main points, and then we summarize it in our beautiful study sheets. And then we take the exam and we cry because we didn't do as good as we wanted, even though we put all this time and energy into highlighting, summarizing, and rereading information. And the thing that's funny is that every nursing video that I've seen about how to study for nursing school highlights the points that you should use highlighting, summarizing, and rereading information. So that's why I decided let's look at the research. And this is what the research shows us. 2 ways to effectively study. So what I'm going to do is insert the information here, which is from my course, Nursing School Mastery, which goes over all of the science related to how to study effectively in nursing school. Hello and welcome to Module 2. So in this module, we're going to learn how to study, and we're going to look at the research and find the most effective study techniques, and then we're going to look at some resources we can use to create a study plan based off of our learning style. Again, we want to work smarter, not harder. And wait till you guys see the research in this. I was so blown away. I'm very excited to show you guys this. All right, so quickly, let's go over some ineffective study techniques. So in my research, I have found that rereading, highlighting, and summarizing actually are ineffective study techniques. This does not mean you shouldn't read. You should read. You just shouldn't reread what you read. And again, highlighting is more, it's a passive form of learning. You can kind of zone out and do it, and it's just not really going to help you to retain the information. And then summarizing, this is kind of writing your notes based off of the lectures or the book. It's kind of like creating those study guides, which I know a lot of nursing students do, but these study guides actually are not the most effective way to retain the information. So let's go over what the most effective way is. I will say in nursing school, there's something nice about having a pretty study guide just because there's so many slides. So I can sort of understand how people may still want to summarize after this lecture. However, I just want you to keep in mind that that is not the most effective way. However, if you find you're a visual learner, summarizing may be good for you because you might be able to create like a colorful study guide, and then that might be able to help you kind of remember things. But if we're looking at the most effective ways, these are not them. All right, let's look at some research. I know there is a lot going on. Here, I'm going to move myself over to the other side so you guys can see all the words. Okay. So I know there's a lot going on, but we're going to go over it, and it's going to be easy. All right. So this study is a 55-page study about learning and how students learn best. So it's a very long study. We're not going to go over all of it, but we're going to go over what's important for you to know. So they looked at 10 different learning techniques and found their utility related to learning, and their utility is defined as their worth. So something with a high utility has a high worth when it comes to learning. So we want to know, what are the high utility tools? So I'm not going to read through all of these, but I have them here for you guys to see, because these are not the results. These are just descriptions of the different study styles that they researched. And I put this in here because I felt like when it says elaborate interrogation on the next page and gives the results, do we really know what elaborate interrogation is? I've never heard of that term. But then we come here and we can see in the description what type of learning that is. So that's why I put this here. You guys can kind of look back and forth so you can understand all the different things. Okay, so let's go on to the next one. And this is the study down at the bottom where this came from. Okay, so here are the results. And again, we want to look at the utility. What has high utility? And what they found is that practice testing and distributed practice have high utility, have high worth when it comes to learning. Okay, so what does this mean? So distributed practice, if we go back, is implementing a schedule of practice that spreads out activities over time. So you're studying over periods of time. Do not cram. Do not cram. Studying 14 hours the day before the exam, you are not going to remember much of the information. And I'm actually going to show you how much of the information you'll remember. So let's get into that. Guys, I'm so excited about this. I love looking at the research. Okay. All right. So let's take a look at some more research. So here is another study. And in this study, students were split up into 4 groups with the task of remembering materials for an exam. Each group was given different instructions for studying content. The first group would read the material only once. The second group would read the material 4 times. The third group would read the material, then make a mind map. So that's kind of like one of those like nursing summary guides, right? And the fourth group would read the material once and then recall as much information as they could. That's what it says, could. Okay. So just take a look at that really quick and think about, what group do you think is going to score the highest, right, on this exam? This is all they did before they took the test, okay? Now let's look at the results. Okay, I know a lot going on, but it's okay, we got this. All right, so looking at verbatim questions, inference questions, and metacognitive predictions. Let's just go over those first because I know that this is a little overwhelming. So verbatim questions, they're just verbatim. What is the definition of this? Inference questions, you have to take your knowledge plus the knowledge that you're studying. So these are more higher level questions, right? Because you really have to think about them. Nursing questions are typically here. You don't get many verbatim questions on the exam. And metacognitive predictions, these are what the students thought that they would score or that they had learned. So this is based off of them saying, I think I'm going to score such and such score, okay? What did we find? This is a big deal, you guys. For both verbatim questions and inference questions, retrieval practice scored the highest. Now, retrieval practice, we're going to go over what that is, but if we relate that back to the first study where it said high worth, that was practice tests. Practice tests are a type of retrieval practice. Okay, so for both of them, and what does this mean? This means, right, that the group that did one-time retrieval practice scored better than the group that read the material 4 times. That's crazy, right? Think of how long you spend reading and rereading and rereading your notes, right? When all you have to do is active recall once and look at how much higher you're scoring is. Imagine if you did active recall 4 times, 5 times. So this is important. Now, here's the other thing, right? If we look over at metacognitive predictions, the students that did the retrieval practice didn't think they were going to do that good. Okay, and that's kind of where we are as nursing students. Like, you would think that just by retrieving the information one time that you would not be scoring well, right? And the students who reread the information 4 times thought they were going to score the highest. And I feel like this is like light bulb going off in my head when I read this, because I feel like this is the struggle that nursing students have. We spend so much time reading our notes, reading the book, rereading, and we go into the exam like, okay, I know this information, and then we don't score as high as we want, and this is why. We think we know it, but we're not doing the right type of study techniques to be able to score high, as seen in both example A and B charts, right? We need to use that retrieval practice. Okay, and again, just to say it one more time, let me move this. Testing yourself once is more effective than rereading the chapter 4 times. That's unreal. Unreal. Okay, let's go on to the next one. All right, so the most effective study techniques, the top 2 must-haves. There are no debate in this, okay? You guys, like, you have to add this to your study practice, period. There's no like, oh, that doesn't work for me. Like, no, this works for everyone, so you need to start doing it. 1, active recall. So again, that is considered practice testing and retrieval practice. So what is active recall? Active recall is when we put away our book, we put away our notes, and we try to remember as much information as possible, right? And then once we've written out on the information or set it, or usually if you write it out, it's a little better because you can look and see what you've missed. So 2 ways to do this, right? You can do your practice test, or you can write out all the information with your book and notes closed based off of what you can remember. Then once you've written it out, you go back and open your book or your notes and you see what you've missed. And then you use your spaced repetition to then repeat this, right, over a series of scheduled study times, okay? So it's putting those 2 together. Now, to do this, I've put up 2, 3. Well, one of them is just different colors, but I've put, I believe, 2 PDFs into the Module 2 folder. One is a pharmacology one, and one is an AdPi. They're both active recall PDFs, and it goes through, you write at the top whatever you're dealing with. So say, schizophrenia, and then you active recall everything that you need to know about that disease in the nursing interventions, right? So you have your assessment, diagnosis, interventions, planning, evaluations. You have all little boxes, and you recall. So you write in those everything from your notes that you can remember, and then you repeat. So hopefully that study tool will help you guys a little bit. Another active recall technique is note cards. So I'll go into later on some good software to use. So you can either write out note cards, or you can use an online note card creating software, and you can actually do this with some friends. So you don't have to write out all these note cards based on your notes. You can actually combine it with friends, like you do chapter 1, I'll do chapter 2, you do chapter 3, and you guys can share note cards. The thing that's great if you're using an app is you can then put it on your phone. So say you're at work and you get a little bit of downtime, or say you're just sitting on the couch at your house and you have, some downtime, you don't want to pull out your notes, but you can do practice questions. So that kind of comes into the practice testing. Note cards work great. Spaced repetition. This is that distributed practice. This is the scheduled studying for a period of time, usually a shorter period of time over multiple intervals. And we're going to go over the best way to do this. Okay, so we kind of talked about this a little bit in the last slide, but active recall is retrieving information from memory. You want to write out as much as you possibly can. Keep your books closed and your notes. You can use your active recall sheet, the AdPi or the pharmacology recall sheet, and when you're done, open your book and notes and see what you missed, and then repeat. So you can create those note cards. Some apps you can use, there's Anki, and there's also Quizlet. I know a lot of undergraduate students use Quizlet. A lot of graduate students use Anki. I'm not sure how you guys are doing your notes, but I do know with Anki, some note-taking systems, you can just create the note cards right through their software. So it's just whatever works best for you. And however, with Quizlet, you can split it up with your friends. That's something that's nice, and share decks. And then practice tests. You want to complete practice questions before you take the exam. You can find these in your book, online, or in practice test books, but you need to do those, okay? All right, so let's talk about spaced repetition. This is kind of cool. So spacing your reviewing of topics at specific intervals over a period of time. So this chart down here, this is Ebbinghaus, I don't know how you say it, but Ebbinghaus forgetting curve. So if we look, I think I actually have a better one somewhere. Is it next? It's here. Okay. So if we look, this is also Ebbinghaus forgetting curve. If we look, if you cram, right, immediate recall, let's say it's almost 100%. However, you've lost almost 60% of the information within an hour. So if you're cramming the night before your exam, 9, 10, 12 hours later, I mean, you're talking like between 24 and 38% of the information that you're going to remember. And that's not good. That's not going to get you a good score on the exam. Let's go back to the other slide. So this is that one line, right? So the forgetting curve, it drops like this. However, every time we review, the curve changes. So if we review and then say this is the next day, we then review again. Or this is when we learned it in our class, right? This is our first review. So what happens is we start to have a learning curve. And the learning curve is going the opposite way, because the more we review, the more we learn. So what is important about this is that every time we review, so first review, which then creates this line because it starts over. Because every time we review, we see the information again. So we're back up at 100% retention every time we review. So we're at 100% retention, and then we start to forget again. But then we have our second review, right? And then we're back up. And then we have our third review. And look what happens. The more we review, the flatter the curve becomes of forgetting. So, I mean, if we're over here at a fifth time review, we're almost at 100% retention. So I think it's really important when you guys are setting up a study plan, minimum for your content, you want to be doing a review, which is active learning, right? That doesn't mean rereading your notes 4 times, right? Because we learned that that doesn't correlate to higher test grades. When we talk about reviewing, that's when we want to use the active recall, because that's the best way to learn. So we want to be doing practice tests or note cards or writing out all the information we can remember about different topics that we've covered in class. All right, so minimum 3 times review, okay? If you want to do really well, I would say 5 times review. I mean, that curve is almost flat, you know? So the questions you're going to get wrong when you've reviewed 5 times are the really, really poorly worded or super tricky questions. It's not that you don't know the information, it's just tricky, right? Because, I mean, look at those forgetting curves. Flatten right out. So important. But again, it's not just any review. It's using the best learning tools, because you want to really magnify your learning. You have a lot of information to learn. And then we come back to this, right? The point of this chart, this is the same curve as the first one. This just doesn't include each review, how the curve changes. But we can see between, 9 hours later and 6 days, 4 days later, I mean, you're really not remembering much of the information, and you're not going to do well on the exam. I mean, even 20 minutes later, you have over, 43% is gone 20 minutes later. So cool stuff. And this comes from down there. All right, so let's get talking about spaced repetition. So spacing, you're reviewing topics at specific intervals over a period of time. So we want to plan a schedule that works for you. So there is this book called The Straight A Student by Cal Newport, and he recommends 50-minute intervals being the ideal study session 3 times a day. So you guys can do whatever you want. These are just suggestions, right? But you want to make sure that they're study intervals. You don't want to be studying 10 hours straight, right? So this is just what Cal recommends, but if you want to do an hour twice a day or an hour and a half twice a day, you do whatever you want. This is just what he recommends. But you want to make sure you're studying every day. I mean, if you're working and stuff, maybe those days you aren't studying if you're working like 12s or something, but you want to make those reviews every day. All right, so no distractions. So during this study interval, whatever you decide it is, say you decide to do the 50 minutes 3 times a day, and that could include also the lecture, because you are reviewing material in lecture. It's important to not have distractions. So you want to either turn your phone off, turn the ringer off, set a timer, or use an app like the Forest app, which is pretty cool because you set a timer and it grows a tree while the timer is going. And if you interrupt it to go on your phone, the tree dies. So it kind of has that, you see an immediate goal. So that's kind of a fun thing. A lot of students like that. All right, and again, the more often you review, the more you retain. So use a form of active recall at every study session. Other study resources. So here's just some tools to help you guys. All right, so one thing that's important is to understand your learning style. If you're a visual learner, listening to something is not going to help you, and vice versa. So just to go back to this, so there is a PDF in this folder that gives you a test. It's like a bunch of questions that you just check off. You just check off if they relate to you, and it will tell you what type of learner you are. So once you've identified that, we can look at some apps that might be helpful to you. So the thing is, Picmonic is great for both visual and auditory learners because they have these cute little drawings, right? So like Fever Bear, this shows like a fever. And what they do is they put them into stories. So if you like listening to learn, you can remember these stories. And if you like visual, you will remember the pictures. So this helped a ton in pharmacology, just to remember all that monotonous information. So I personally would also incorporate this into active learning and a spaced repetition, but these are just some other tools you can use. So we have the Note Card app and Quizlet. UWorld has great practice tests. I know there's some books with practice tests as well, but I think the UWorld questions are amazing. So I just wanted to put that on there. If you don't use them in nursing school, you can buy a longer one and you can make focus tests. So if you're on the cardiac section, you can go into UWorld and make an exam based on cardiac only, which is great. So you can either get a longer subscription so you can use that while you're in school and then use it to study for the NCLEX, but I definitely recommend you guys use this to study for NCLEX. And again, that Forest app to help reduce distractions when studying. And then up here, this link, you guys, is just going to get you 20% off Picmonic if you want to use it, if it's something that works for you. I really, really liked it. So just to end with a quote, satisfaction lies in effort, not in the attainment. Full effort is full victory. So the fact you guys have now gotten through module 2, you're putting in the effort, and we're going to keep moving forward so we can come up with a
success plan, and so you can have full victory. All right, see you guys in Module 3.
Using those two things, we can remember the most information possible. On top of that, it's really important that we manage our anxiety. And to manage our anxiety, we want to focus on vagus nerve stimulation. And what this is you probably know the vagus nerve in nursing school as like something that makes people pass out, but it also relaxes your body. And the easiest way to use vagus nerve stimulation is to do deep belly breathing, which I know kind of sounds a little woo-woo, but it works. Because what happens is when we take nursing exams, we get so anxious and we get stressed out, and our sympathetic nervous system starts going, and then we can't think clearly and our mind is racing. And if you have test-taking anxiety, one of the best tools you can use is deep belly breathing before and during the exam when you feel yourself getting worked up. And what this does is it stimulates the opposite of the sympathetic nervous system, which is the parasympathetic nervous system, and it helps our body to relax so you can think clearly and be able to answer questions correctly. So the next thing that I recommend to study effectively in nursing school is to make a plan and look at your habits. So you want to be able to create a study plan. Having a plan and doing a little bit every day will allow you to stay on top of the crazy amount of information that you're going to have to study while in nursing school. So what this could mean is that you take an hour every day to do nursing schoolwork instead of being bombarded at the end of the week and having to do 8 hours of schoolwork to catch up on all of the information from the week. You also want to look at your habits. What are you doing daily? Where is your time going? What do you spend time doing? Looking at these can help to identify where you may be able to have some more time. Also, by creating a study plan, it can allow you to implement time for things that you love. A big part of nursing school is people start to feel really overwhelmed. They miss hanging out with their friends. They miss seeing their family. Their friends are all out having fun and they're studying for an exam, which is not fun. So if you can put aside a little time every day to study, then you may be able on a Saturday to take the night off and be able to go out with friends. So really being able to implement a study schedule and practice positive habits can be really helpful. So another test-taking strategy is to understand NCLEX style questions. You guys are interested, you can check out my video linked above, which goes over NCLEX style questions. And lastly, I want to remind you guys to focus on resiliency and mindset. So being resilient is being able to overcome difficult situations, and nursing school is a difficult situation. Being resilient is how you bounce back from those. I personally, honestly think that nursing school is difficult because they are trying to weed out the weak, because being a nurse, you don't just become a nurse and life gets great and easy. Being a nurse is difficult. You feel like you're drowning a lot. You feel like you're overworked. Burnout's a huge thing in nursing. So they want to create strong nurses, and being able to bounce back from a bad test score or a negative clinical instructor or something like that is really important. And it's going to help you in your future nursing career when things do get tough. And again, bringing into the resilience is also the mindset aspect. The way that you perceive things is going to affect your overall well-being. So just keeping that in mind, if you don't do well in an exam, you can cry about it for an hour, but then let it go. Don't perseverate on it for days. And, focus on your mental health as well as your physical health, and you'll get through it. So if you guys want some more information about all of these things we covered, I do offer a course below. It's called Nursing School Mastery, and you can check out a free preview in the link below. And I also have some study guides down there as well to help you guys out. So if you guys enjoyed this video, make sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe below, and I'll see you guys soon. Bye.